Good evening, gentlemen, and welcome to the Compliance Implications for New Era Payment Methodologies and Government Perspective conference call. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Later, we'll facilitate a question-and-answer session. If at any time during the call you require operator assistance, you may key star zero, and we'll be happy to assist you. As a reminder, this conference is being recorded for replay purposes. I'd like to turn the call over to Michelle Cooper, the CI Senior Vice President and Corporate Responsibility Officer. You may begin.
Hey, Francis, and welcome everybody. We're pleased to offer this quarter's Governance Perspective education session. Before we get started, I'd like to offer the following reflection. I'll start with 10 thoughts on whole living. Is a sense, not a gift. All have the inner genius to create. Touch is a powerful healing tool. Use it lovingly and often. Thing is energy. Use it to empower, not control your life. A sip of tea can teach us the importance of ritual. Deeply, what is noticed or not. Find something sacred in your day, every day. A day walk can engage your body and mind. Before year's end, connect your soul to the earth with a healthy, bountiful feast. Allow the body to unwind every evening. Passion does not get lost, just abandoned. It's never too late to find it again. With that, I offer the following prayer. As we are creator and source of all being, we give you thanks for the beauty of this day, the gift of this world, and for the gift of each other. We give thanks for the gift of our vocation to Catholic healthcare. We thank you for the ways in which you become present to us in our service of the sick and the suffering, the poor and outcast. As we gather here, we ask you to be with us as we continue to reflect on this unique vocation and seek to live it more fully in the world. Open our eyes that we may see what you wish us to see. Open our ears that in our dialogue we may hear what you want us to hear. Open our hearts that we may feel as you feel toward those in greatest need of our services. Bless you here in our gathering. May be a holy work done in your name. We ask this in your name. Amen. And at this time, I would like to introduce our speakers. We have two speakers, Lee Berthoff, who is the Vice President and Corporate Responsibility Officer. Lee has oversight for Nebraska as well as Des Moines and the Fargo divisions. She also oversees compliance related to many of our new payment methodologies and serves as the compliance expert for the cardiac service line and the ortho spine service line. And secondly, we have Holly Stroud, who's also a Vice President and Corporate Responsibility Officer, and she serves as the lead over Franciscan Health System and Prominence Health. She also serves as our expert on the oncology service line. So we'd like to turn it over to Lee, and she will be speaking. So I'm going to turn it over to Holly first, who will be speaking primarily about some of our managed care efforts at CHI and some of the fiduciary implications of that. So, Holly?
Thank you, Michelle. Slide, please. So, welcome, everyone. Good morning and or good afternoon, depending on which coast. Given that we've gathered a broad range of board members and representatives today that provide oversight for our health system in a variety of settings, I thought it was important for you to understand the compliance risks related to some of CHI's new business models and alternative payment arrangements. Lee and I will highlight for you today some compliance implications for your consideration related to health plans provided by Prominence Health, particularly focused on Medicare Advantage, also Medicare Shared Savings Program, and the Bundled Payment Care Improvement Initiative. Additional objectives is really to help you understand the risks that are associated with these models and some key highlights from a fiduciary perspective. Next slide. So what we have here is a depiction of our description of the services that Prominence Health, a wholly owned for-profit subsidiary of CHI, is providing. So on the left-hand side of the slide, you'll see our current delivery services as well as capabilities across our various markets. And right-hand side of the slide, you'll see the customers both at a local, regional, and national level that are potential customers, consumers, or business relationships for the organization. And Prominence has positioned themselves and created a variety of services and solutions that are outlined in the center column there, including health solutions, health plans and third-party administrator products, health networks, and health technologies. So really a way for the organization to continue to expand the services that we provide. Before we get to the specifics, I did want to draw your attention to the health plan section of the slide in the dark blue. The plans provided include both commercial plans, Medicare Advantage, Managed Medicaid, and then plans in the private marketplace through the health insurance exchanges. I just take a minute, and most of you are likely aware, but just to sort of refresh and tee our conversation regarding Medicare Advantage plans. So if you'll remember, Medicare established the Medicare Advantage plans as a way for private health insurers to provide comprehensive medical coverage to seniors and other Medicare beneficiaries throughout the United States. And this approach is different from traditional Medicare in that there are incentives for the health plans to place strong emphasis on preventive health care services to keep beneficiaries healthy, detect disease in early age, and avoid preventable illnesses. In fact, the research has shown that these beneficiaries receive higher quality care, have fewer preventable hospital readmissions, and are less likely to have potentially avoidable hospitalizations. It certainly aligns with our mission to build healthier communities and to improve quality. Currently, there are more than 16 million Americans that are enrolled in this program, which represents about 30% of the Medicare eligible population. Next slide. Health plan services. Prominence really had their first foray into the health insurance operation in March of 2013 when CHI acquired a majority interest in Path Health, which is a Medicare Advantage plan located in Federal Way, Washington. Following that acquisition, Prominence successfully submitted Medicare applications for additional plans in other markets and was awarded contracts in 4 additional states: Tennessee, Nebraska, Ohio, and Kentucky. And those plans began delivering services on January 1st of 2015. Also look to the future. There are new product offerings planned for 2016, so Medicare Advantage, which is include Medicare Part D prescription drug coverage, and we have new plans, both Harvest Plains Health in Des Moines and Qual Choice Advantage in Little Rock, Arkansas, that are planned to begin in 2016. In the time CHI and Prominence have been in this market, the Medicare Advantage membership has grown from 16,000 to over 22,000 and continues to grow. Next slide. Then I also mentioned the commercial health plan business. And so meanwhile, while all the Medicare Advantage activity was ongoing, in May of 2014, Prominence also acquired Qual Choice Life and Health in Little Rock, Arkansas. They offer commercial products in that state and include all of the products listed, and it's like an alphabet soup in terms of acronyms here. We've included at the end of the slide deck a list of terms and abbreviations, but really their statewide offerings were broad, included group medical coverage, supplemental insurance, third-party administration, so flexible spending accounts, health reimbursement accounts, and post-employment group health coverage through COBRA. The covered lives at the point of acquisition were 72,000, and currently they have grown to nearly 103,000. The majority of that growth has come from products that are offered on the state insurance exchange. Next slide, please. So this is just to give you a perspective of not only where are your markets with your responsibility, but what are the health plans that are in and near those markets. The green indicates Medicare Advantage plan, and the single red there is Qual Choice. The primary services are provided out of Arkansas and Washington, with administrative services also provided in Denver, Colorado, and Minneapolis. There are field offices that then support the local plans. I really want to move into, in the next slide, to talk about the complex regulatory environment. So next slide, please. Just a very high level and general picture of the regulatory environment as it relates to health plans. The American Association of Health Plans actually has a schematic that's very similar to this, only it was a little much to put on the screen, and I would ask that you envision anywhere from 12 to 25 agencies or departments under many of these institutions and regulatory bodies that oversee and dictate the health plans, particularly Medicare, Medicaid, state licensure, State Department of Insurance, and even private accreditation requirements. So in the event of certain health exchange plans being offered, there are requirements for private accreditation, whether it be NCQA or URAC or others of those. So definitely a lot of agencies following what is happening and overseeing the health plans that we participate in. Next slide. So from your perspective, what as having fiduciary responsibilities are you going to want to be aware of in terms of risks? When you think of all the regulatory bodies and regulations that would come from all those agencies we saw on the previous slide, I really wanted to take a minute to focus on some key categories of risk that should be considered both from Prominence's perspective as well as CHI. With regards to Prominence, health insurance financial risks are significant. Health insurance programs require risk-based capital reserves be established and held by the entity, and those reserves are regulated by each Department of Insurance. Health plans also must be prepared to support variable underwriting losses, including when to secure stop loss reinsurance. In terms of administrative risks, there are many. Medicaid has very strict marketing guidelines that we'll talk about. Have requirements, very specific measurements that they monitor regarding the network you utilize. Is it adequate? Is it accurately represented in your provider directory? Are the beneficiaries able to get access to those providers? And are they appropriately enrolled in Medicare and credentialed? And for any of us that have had to utilize health insurance benefits, you understand claims payment accuracy and timeliness is a key performance indicator of any health plan. Customer service, accuracy of receiving those calls, timeliness of responding to beneficiary customer concerns or questions, and then utilization management processes. So processes that health plans require for prior authorization for a service or a medication, and if that is denied, what are the appropriate appeal rates, grievances, how are they handled, and oversight of any entity that the health plan delegates services to. So if someone else is processing claims, if you are contracting with a marketing provider to market your health plan, you need to be overseeing those services. And then the same really privacy and security considerations that we have across our health system. Then there's contractual requirements. There are federal and state regulatory provisions that have to be included in your provider contracts, specific reimbursement parameters that need to be followed. From the employer-member perspective, the accuracy of your benefit structure and how you calculate your rates. And then the key financial parameters in terms of medical loss ratio or, as I mentioned before, health insurance exchange benefit parameter requirements that the plans need to be following. So the risk perspective for CHI, the economic exposure. There's been the provision of risk-based capital and an investment in Prominence Health. There's risks related to CHI's assumption of medical expense downside risk. There's also administrative and operating risks. What does it take from CHI's infrastructure to support this new line of business, including all regulations? We need legal, we need IT, provider services, our ACOs, our CINs, corporate responsibility, the list goes on. And then you have the usual compliance risks that we see across our health system: STAR antitrust, provider health plans, conflict of interest. What are the economic arrangements we have in place with our network? What is the implication? Is there referral steerage? Has fair market value been considered in delegating network development to our CINs? Or the market alleged any anti-competitive behavior between providers and payers? And under the other category, really civil and criminal legal exposure, in that CMS, in any sanctions to our health plans, could sanction to the level of CHI. And of note, they do list CHI as the parent company over each of these plans. In terms of the impact on our local markets, it's really what's the reaction by our market and other payers knowing that CHI has entered the payer market, and secondly, what compliance considerations might this create for us? Do we have physicians that we have arrangements with that also may have arrangements with our health plans? Again, we really need to be considering what the variety of risk exposures are that come from this line of business. Next slide, please. I wanted to talk a little bit about the compliance requirements. As you all know, the OIG has compliance guidance for hospitals and other segments of our healthcare system, but those were clearly stated when they were initially rolled out as being voluntary, although we know how important they are. When Medicare Advantage was designed and approved by CMS, they took a very different approach. They have a Medicare manual that's dedicated to compliance that spells out all of the elements of the program, including the corporate responsibility officer may not be legal counsel. That person may be employed by the plan sponsor or the parent company, and it goes on to be very prescriptive in regards to who that person reports to. The compliance program elements are very similar to what we're used to. They do include evaluation of the effectiveness of your client or your compliance program, but also they add stringent requirements regarding compliance oversight and auditing and monitoring of all your delegates, known in these agreements as first-tier, downstream, and related entities. So that, depending on the volume of delegates any health plan has, creates additional compliance risks and additional compliance oversight responsibilities. And then finally, if you'll note, the government guidance specifically calls out that the governing body is to be knowledgeable about the content and the operation of the compliance program and to exercise reasonable oversight. I wanted to note that just recently, last month, a proposed rule was released regarding managed Medicaid organizations. And this has not really been guidance since 2002, but of note, in addition to establishing some national standards regarding provider enrollment, claims payments, and management of the financials, they actually have established a national standard regarding overpayments in terms of obligation to repay, and reporting by the plan. Also note, they have specifically called out a documented system, training, and education for the compliance officer, the management, employees of not only the state standards, but the federal standards and the contract requirements. establishing a regulatory compliance committee of the board and at the senior management level charged with oversight of the program. So this is something we're going to want to watch closely in terms of when the final rule is published. Next slide. In terms of compliance requirements, and I think it's important to understand that these health plans may transfer some of the financial risk to the providers, but they remain the fiduciary party that's accountable to the regulatory agencies, whether it's the Department of Insurance at the state level or CMS at the federal level. There are multiple performance measurement requirements, and when I talked about the administrative risks and all those elements related to providing services to health plan members, there are regulatory requirements that you measure and report how you perform in all of those areas. In addition to that, there's frequent oversight, and when we look at our Medicare Advantage plans, we can expect auditing by CMS-approved vendors, whether it's financial, whether it's evaluating claims payment and processing, whether it's looking at the accuracy of coding and how that establishes the calculation of the reimbursement of the health plan. There's also CMS program audits, and I want to talk a minute about those today. And also the fact is that any of these activities can result in civil and monetary penalties or sanctions. So the civil monetary penalties are considered the most common and lowest level enforcement that CMS can take, but it can go all the way up to the suspension of marketing and enrollment. And for a Medicare Advantage plan that's critical, you can only enroll beneficiaries in the final calendar quarter for the following year unless you're a five-star plan, and only about 3% of the Medicare Advantage plans are five-star plans. In terms of civil monetary penalties and the risks, the sanctions and enforcement appear to be ramping up in this arena, just as we have seen it in the health systems. In calendar year 2014, there were 30 plans that were fined a total of $4.9 million, and those fines ranged from $20,000 to $227,000. That was the entire year. In the first quarter of calendar year 2015, 10 plans have already been fined a total of $2.5 million. In the period last year, there was only one plan for $50,000. The cost of those fines in the first quarter were $689,000, and just in April, Aetna fined $1 million due to inaccurate pharmacy listings in their provider directory. Next slide, please. So to take a moment and share with you the experience that SoundPath Health has had and continues to undergo since July of last year, and that is CMS program audit. So in July, they were notified that they would have a full audit, and Core Responsibility had a mock survey conducted when we initially engaged with them and provided some good feedback and help to prepare them for this experience. So when we received the audit notification in July, there were literally 2 weeks to provide samples of claims, appeals, grievance, customer service record, and a variety of information to prepare for webinars a month later. So they had 3 audit teams simultaneously conducting reviews of all of the areas of focus, and then during the final week of the audit, a team of 5 auditors came out to review the compliance effectiveness. In August, that audit was completed. At the point that those are completed, you receive corrective actions and immediate corrective actions. SoundPath received 36 corrective actions total. 11 of those were immediate. I say immediate, in Medicare's mind, the issues represent some risk to beneficiary harm, whether it's failing to provide them an explanation or their appeal rights within the times or their prescription medication. So again, Medicare is very focused on the quality and the management of the beneficiaries in these plans. A lot of work has continued to remediate. Once the final report was issued in December, they assessed a civil monetary penalty of $250,100. The work continued amongst operations with compliance oversight and engagement with Medicare to review and remediate all corrective actions until the point in May of this year the CEO was able to sign an attestation stating that all the correct actions, all 36, had been completed, which now has started the clock for CMS to come back and revalidate. Meanwhile, remember, these folks are operating a health plan as well as managing these audits. So next month there will be a mock audit to prepare them further, and CMS will conduct their validation in August. So it gives you a sense of the level of scrutiny that these plans are under. Next slide, please. And I also just want to talk a little bit more about marketing risks, because this really seems to be an area of significant focus where we're seeing sanctions and fines imposed. Again, like the compliance manual, Medicare Advantage has very strict marketing guidelines in terms of the training of your agents, the licensure that's required, how they're compensated. In fact, when Medicare Advantage plans were first rolled out, there were numerous complaints and congressional hearings in 2007 and 2008 that led to an OIG audit and report that basically found three areas of concern. Agents were misleading beneficiaries about the benefits. There were incidences identified where they may have been enrolled without the appropriate consent. And some agents were engaged in aggressive sales tactics. CMS actually secret shops and dials in to these agents and does monitoring. As a result of those kinds of activities, there are a few marketing violation tales, I guess, I would like to share. Arcadian is a plan that it was determined that they were misleading the beneficiaries about which providers were in their network or what drugs were included in their formulary. HealthNet had had a program audit. It was also found that they weren't properly administering the pharmacy benefit. And Universal, agents misled the beneficiaries about the providers in the network, the accuracy of the directory, and that when they specifically had asked if their drugs were covered as a part of the formulary, that information was not accurately disclosed to them. It was the middle of the open enrollment season in 2011, and CMS ordered all three plans to cease marketing, and they could no longer enroll new beneficiaries. So you can see the implications of marketing violations for these plans is significant. Next slide. So governance perspective, some things to consider and think about. Given that Medicare Advantage says that governance will exercise reasonable oversight of the compliance program, do you have an understanding of the compliance risks that are associated with this business line? And do we have independent industry expertise represented and assisting us in doing that oversight from the board perspective? What are the privacy and IT security concerns that may be unique to this line of business? Is the quality adequately addressed, given that that's a key measure for these plans? Also, what is the reaction or repercussion from the insurance industry? We all know we've had a significant experience in Nebraska, having entered that insurance market, and the ongoing dialogue with Blue Cross Blue Shield. So just a few thoughts to leave you there in terms of governance considerations, and I'd like to turn it over to Lee Berthoff now.
Next slide. To comment on a couple things that Holly said, and I just want to clarify. Holly referenced the term clinically integrated network, or CIN. And clinically integrated network is really a network of providers and hospitals or healthcare systems entities can come together and work to improve the quality of care that's provided to the patient. And in response to that, the government has relaxed on the antitrust laws around that relationship, as long as we can demonstrate that our primary purpose for existence is improving patient care. What it allows us to do is to negotiate our payer contracts together, whereas historically we have been independent in our negotiation. So the implication for the clinically integrated networks as it relates to the Medicare Shared Savings Program or the ACO's accountable care organizations that we're going to discuss is we're not going to really get into the clinically integrated networks today, but usually the vehicle in which the ACO or care organizations contracts for their provider panel. So the CIN existed first, and ACOs can be multi-limited liability companies that contract for all or a subset of the ACO participants, the CIN participants to participate within the accountable care organization. So new methodologies for payment really create a cognitive dissonance with changing payment structures. So in our historic paper service models, the more utilization, the greater utilization, the more reimbursement. As we do the Medicare Shared Savings Program, the accountable care organizations that may be commercial or Medicare, and also the bundled payments, it really is a new paradigm shift in terms of decreased utilization equals reimbursement, increased reimbursement. And it's difficult because they're parallel paths. So we're in the fee-for-service model, and we're transitioning more to a value-based model. So the Medicare Shared Savings Program is really what we call the Medicare Accountable Care Organization. And I'll briefly touch on the fact that we do have commercial ACs also, that we may be working with commercial payers to have a very high-efficiency, value-based model that we're also engaged in. So the Affordable Care Act was the vehicle in which this model was introduced. Allows us to come together from providers and suppliers to deliver to a group of beneficiaries. And all have the same goals in terms of improving patient care, increasing the health amongst populations, and reducing healthcare spending, whether that be the federal spending or even the commercial spending. Everybody wants to spend less. We really have an expectation of higher quality at lower cost. And just to keep in mind as we talk about bundles later on, bundles can also be offered within the concept of the accountable care organization. So they really are synergistic with one another as we move through. Next slide, please. ACA model is really, it's a risky venture. We have, it's significant in terms of its change to our delivery care as well as our compensation. These arrangements that may be necessary or desirable to form the ACOs, CMS was very kind to us and actually gave us waivers for, Holly referenced the Stark and anti-kickback regulations. They gave us waivers to those regulations, but with those waivers come increasing concerns for fraud and abuse. There are some, with the ACO model, you would expect that you'd be able to direct referrals very cleanly, but CMS said that it still has to have the right to choose their own providers or own entity in which they receive care, such as home health, skilled nursing, whatever. So while we have responsibility for the overall cost, and I'll talk about the model a little bit later, overall cost of the episode of care or the delivery of that care, we'd be having to partner with individuals that may not be part of that ACO. CMS is already auditing for the accuracy of quality metric data extraction, so they come actually into the entity and look through the records to make sure that the abstraction of those quality measures are accurately reflected. We can make our books and accessible to the Comptroller General, the federal government, or any of their designees. And retention responsibility is 10 years, which is different that historically we've had a 7-year requirement. While the ACO is partnering with multiple individuals or entities to provide the care, the ACO retains the client's risk for the care that's delivered. Slide, please. So the ACO has to meet all the program requirements. I talked about the quality standards, and then ultimately the goal is to obtain a percentage of any savings in the Medicare program expenditures during the year in which they've contracted. Typically, the ACO contracts for Medicare Shared Savings Program are 3-year tracks. So when we sign up, we're going to be in the program for 3 years. This year, they're offering 3 types of Medicare Shared Savings Program arrangements. The first is a 50% shared savings with an upside only. That is historically the first model that people enter into as it relates to the ACO. The second model is a 60% shared savings and loss, so there's an upside and downside to that. And with those 2 models, typically the ACO doesn't know necessarily who is in their ACO until after the program's over. So retrospective analysis, which has kind of disadvantaged the ACOs. So the third model this year that is also being offered is a 5% shared savings loss with prospective participant assignment. That's very attractive for many of our ACOs because now they'll know who their participants are at the onset, and they can actually manage that care, because it's very difficult to manage the care if you're not finding out that that participant is a member of the ACO until towards the end of that year. Financial risk at this level is 50% of the Medicare spend, which is a considerable amount of risk. We anticipate any of the ACOs would have that kind of repayment liability, but that would be the worst case scenario from a financial liability perspective. Next slide. So from an ACO compliance perspective, as Holly indicated with the managed care plans, we must employ CRO that reports to the ACO's governing body. It can be legal counsel, and people ask me why can it not be legal counsel, and oftentimes legal counsel has a different view in terms of many arrangements can be legal. We can draft a legal contract. That arrangement does have an ability to be legal. However, how it's operationalized it may not be possible to operationalize it in a legal way. So that it kind of blurs the lines if you have the person making the determination if it's legal, look at it also from an operational perspective. So that's one of the motivations behind differentiating those roles. Implementing a system to allow the employees, contractors, and participants to bring forth any compliance issues. So we have to have a high reporting mechanism, and that's standard in our program that we have right now. Compliance program then provides education to all participants and to all individuals, and that includes our physician and partners such as skilled facilities and our home health agencies. We need to have a policy that requires our ACO employees and contractors to bring forth potential or not just potential, but they have to be suspected violations of the law to the appropriate law enforcement agency. It's not enough if they think we've really we suspect that we're breaking the law. It's not enough if they report it to the organization, but they're to take it forward. And then having auditing and monitoring programs in place to encompass the entire ACO. One of the penalties that can occur if we don't do these things is from the program. Early termination is going to be failure to supply required information, violation of the fraud and abuse laws, use of false information. It typically occurs if there's immediate risk or harm to the beneficiaries or impacts on care. They will give us a notice prior to termination to let us know what's going on, what they suspect is the issue, and give us an opportunity to correct the violation. Please. Some of the governance considerations are how will the ACO coordinate care across the participants? So how are we going to communicate with all the participants? What kind of IT systems are there that allow us to coordinate care? What infrastructure from a care management perspective do we have in place? How are we addressing the issue of freedom of choice that our can still express where they want to choose to receive their care. What's governance structure? 75% of the governing body have to be providers. And the primary care cannot participate in any more than one ACO. They need to devote a significant amount of their time towards developing protocols and assistance in developing quality of care indicators so that they're providing that quality of improved care for lower cost. Specialists can participate in more than one ACO. One of the concepts that's going to be very difficult is determining who's in and out. We have historically included everybody. So if you wanted to be with us, we welcomed you with open arms to be part of us. With the clinically integrated networks, and I talked about the arrangement that we have for the antitrust risk and improving clinical care, one of the things that CMS is looking for, are we holding our providers accountable to provide care according to those guidelines that are being established, that we're asking them to invest a significant amount of their time developing. If they're not following those protocols and we're not seeing the quality of care delivered to those patients, what action are we taking? And most uncomfortable actions may be termination of that provider from our network. So it's even conceivable that we may have employed physicians that may not be able to be part of our clinically integrated networks or our ACOs. The organization is going to have to work with our care coordinators and our navigators, working to change the culture of our patients from a dependent role to more of an independent role and taking an active participation in their care. How are we doing that? Because that's the only way we're really going to be able to realize the cost savings that, long-term cost savings that we hope to achieve. And monitoring and reporting the quality improvement and cost reduction efforts. We're dependent from the Medicare Shared Savings Program perspective. We're dependent on CMS giving us the data. And then we have to be comfortable with that data and have mechanisms to analyze that data to make sure it's accurate, and working with CMS to make sure that the quality improvement initiatives or metrics are also being reported correctly. And then because it's a shared responsibility with the providers as well as the organizations and healthcare organizations. And so how is that risk going to be borne in terms of withhold, the structure for that, if there's adequate resources with the withhold, how are we going to recoup that money? So there's some real challenges from that perspective also. Next slide, please. We're going to bundle payment care improvement initiative. It too is a new methodology for payment that is part of the Affordable Care Act. There were a limited number of bundles that were proposed for Medicare that could be included, and then there were 4 methodologies. PHI National actually signed a contract with CMS, and we signed up for Method 2, and it was limited some of our liability, and it seems the most the simpler models to implement. Again, it's looking at partnering with the physicians for integrating the clinical care with the organization and the provider, and sharing some of those cost savings that we receive from Medicare with the physicians. This is counterintuitive when you think of the STAR clause and some of the anti-kickback regulations, but Medicare has created a path that we can pay. There's a calculator in terms of how we pay the physicians based on the improvement. It is not based on value and volume of the coming to us, but it's very dependent on us designing the correctly. And some of the considerations as we go through this is we want to make sure that we've selected the right service line. Go through the slide and demonstrate where we're, or review the demonstration projects that we've got going on out there and who has elected to participate and who has not. And structuring the bundle, how we're going to offer the care, seeing what's our current utilization and what's our desired utilization, identifying operational, clinical, and financial inefficiencies, because that's the only way we're going to actually come on the upside. reducing cost and variation, so establishing a pathway or a guidelines that the physicians follow so that we have standardized care and can have more predictable outcomes. Measuring physician performance and variability, so once we have that data, then providing information to the physicians to demonstrate various performance measures to encourage one another to standardize that care. Really looking at what's our potential risk on the side, because with the bundles there's upside and downside. And then assessing negative impact or negative shifts in terms of market share or what's going to happen if we miss targets. And are we going to engage all of our stakeholders to move us forward in a positive way as we attempt to achieve the goals that we're establishing with the bundle payments. Next slide, please. So, in the organization, we have cardiovascular and orthopedic bundles. There are currently 14 hospitals that are engaging in 15 bundles. 15 of those are total joint replacements. One hospital is, or one market is engaging in the congestive heart failure bundle, and then one is non-cervical spine fusion. Next slide, please. Organization, St. Vincent Little Rock with a total joint actually did receive a positive return on the experience, and theirs has concluded. CH Mercy, Council Bluffs, St. Elizabeth, and Good Samaritan, they have all ceased with their orthopedic bills. CHI St. Elizabeth is now undertaking the non-cervical spinal fusion. All of the rest of those bundles are yet to initiate it or are initiating on July 1. Please. Implications really are very similar to what you've seen before. The CRO needs to report to the Board of Directors. It requires that specific to the bundle payment is provided to all that are involved in the care of the patient, including provider. Requires that a hotline is there so that they can make us aware if there's a concern related to how the bundle is being implemented. And then after 30, from the start date, with year, and then within 30 days of that year anniversary, we have to attest that we have an effective compliance program and we've met the terms of the bundle payment program. When we first did the program with the first 4 facilities, there was no guidance in terms of what needed to be included in that bundle, in that attestation. Just recently in the last month, we've received notice from CMS that they've actually now standardized that form. Luckily, that form looks very similar to the form that we submitted. We suspect that there was great variation amongst the participants in that program, and we're not getting the information they needed because it's very detailed in terms of what is provided through their compliance program. Next slide, please. So bundles have up and downside risk, very similar to the ACOs. The side is it really helps us to integrate with the physicians and both of us move towards common goals. The only market to date that has realized the upside is CHI St. Vincent Little Rock. They really were able to do a job of performing the surgery and maybe the same day, and it was a joint surgery like a knee or a hip, the same day dismissing to home. They were able to bypass the skilled step. So these bundles include 3 days of episode of care, and so that's also the post-acute care that's included in that cost analysis for total cost. And so dismiss home with a little bit of home care, whereas before you might have had a 3-day inpatient stay, skilled care, and then home with home care. We're able to really maximize the opportunity there. Good Samaritan, St. Elizabeth's, and Mercy Council Bluffs are still, their data is still being analyzed. It does not look like it's going to be favorable as St. Vincent's, but we don't know what the end result yet is going to be. There's some concerns that are starting to surface because all these initiatives are really ratcheting down the reimbursement, and what we suspect is that CMS may be using this data that they're receiving in terms of the care data to really retarget or refocus and reestablish DRG payments, and looking at how reimbursement is actually long-term going to be reduced for organizations. And it's difficult because these bundled payments, it's year-over-year savings. You really get the contract for a year, and if the savings isn't there, then that's it. Next, please. These are the abbreviations. Please. More. Next, please. And we're ready for questions now.
And Leah, we're waiting for questions, and we'll have her cue them in just a minute. I did just want to mention the reason we included the abbreviation slides is there was a lot of terminology, and we wanted to make sure that you had it readily available. So after this webcast, Assistant Candy Gibbons will be distributing information on how you can access these slides, as well as go and listen to this presentation if you have questions or there's things you want to follow up on. So that will be forthcoming. But with that, let's turn over to Frances, and if you can let everybody know how to go out posing a question.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, for your audio questions, press star 1 on your touch-tone telephone. Again, press star followed by 1 on your touch-tone telephone. Audio question that comes from the line of Alice Houston. You begin.
Yes, my question is, how did, and I don't want to take much time in answering it, but it seems like evaluating whether this was an appropriate business line. Why did CHI decide to go into this arena? So just like to know.
And you mean more from the standpoint of the payer side, or to join in with...
To do the joint venture in the first place, to...
Talking about the bundled payments primarily, or?
Health plan.
Yeah, to the health, this set of the health delivery system.
Yeah, and you can interject. I think one of the primary reasons is health insurance costs continue to skyrocket. And there's you'll see a lot of news in the press around some of the rates that are paid to some of the for-profit health insurers. It's created some hardships for us when we're negotiating contracts with payers. And at the end of the day, our mission is really to make sure that we are providing high-quality health care to all individuals that in need. And I think CI's decision to enter the health plan, there's probably several reasons, but one of the reasons is it gives us more ability to provide affordable health care to individuals in our market, and to be able to control that pricing much easier than if we contract with outside payers who control, the costs associated with their business.
Yes, it does help. Okay, thanks.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
If you have something.
I was just going to say, one of the statistics that I didn't talk about is in 2007, the United States had the highest ratio of cost to longevity, and with Canada being a far second. We're almost off the charts compared to the rest of the world. So I think all these initiatives are really designed to improve quality and reduce cost, and the strategy is just consistent with that movement towards increasing value of the services we provide while reducing overall cost.
And organizations accountable for that quality of care.
We're able to this date to do that ourselves, so I think it's being somewhat imposed upon us.
We look more broadly at the Prominence organization and the offerings. Us as a system will be developing skills in areas such as patient engagement or population health that may then even more contribute to those goals that Michelle described.
Okay,
No other questions in the queue.
I'll just pose a question for Holly. Do you think the regulatory environment in the payer side is even more complex than we've seen on the acute side? And if so, why?
Seems to be so, and I think part of it is that, particularly on the Medicare Advantage side, this was very prescriptive and very comprehensive in terms of what is expected, and the level of detail that they have outlined for us in terms of how they will evaluate our compliance programs really require an intensity that we've not necessarily seen across all of the markets in the current business line. And based on that proposed rule by Medicaid, I see them jumping on to this bandwagon and expanding. And ultimately, we all know the commercial payers often then are regulated at the level of the government payers down the road. So I do think there's a level of intensity that exists here that we're not necessarily seeing on the delivery side.
As a follow-up question, do you think because of that we're going to see more health plans get into trouble and the government intervene and actually shut down some health plans in the near future?
Well, I think it's a possibility. Senator Grassley just this past May has been asking for the Department of Justice to start investigating Medicare Advantage billing practices, because part of what determines the reimbursement is the level of risk or the severity of illness of your patients based on the coding of your members' claims. And Senator Grassley believes that there could potentially be gaming of the system, and quoted a study that cited that Medicare Advantage plans may have received improper payments of $70 billion in a 5-year period. So yes, I think they're going to be turning up the heat, and there may be plans that may not make it.
Okay. Any other questions in the queue?
No other questions.
Okay, just close and just offer a couple closing thoughts. You know, CHI, as everybody is well aware, has really expanded their overall strategy. I think, you know, obviously you've heard management talk about how we primarily were focused on the acute arena, and I hope this gave you an overview of some new dimensions that CHI has reached out to in support of our strategy, in support of really providing quality care to our patients and our markets, and actually increasing the effectiveness of the health that we're, providing the health wellness efforts that we're providing out in the market. So, we wanted to close that, hopefully we've given you some things to think about as you're serving on the board, as you're serving in a over compliance. Our hope is that this just increased your awareness a little bit around some of these additional risks, so that when conversations are held or information is being provided to you, you'll feel confident in asking questions of leadership, seeking clarity around any areas you don't feel comfortable about, but also understanding that we are paying very close attention internally from a compliance standpoint to make sure that we meet all regulations regardless of the business that we're involved with. So I hope you found this webcast helpful. We'll be offering another one next quarter, and there'll be additional information about that. So with that, just reiterate that we'll be sending information about how you access the slides, and if you found this webcast, please be sure to pass that information on to your peers, boards and committees, those that were not able to make this webcast will be able to listen to it at a later date. So much, everybody, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon. Again, bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes your presentation. You may now disconnect.